Okay, let's get going with part two. Make sure that one works. Yes, it does. Okay, so this is part two, the last part of the talk for this week. I've got a lot to cover, so I'm going to move pretty quick. All right, and so if you missed something, rewind it, go back, take a look at it. Okay. If you have any questions, like always, please contact me, and I will be more than happy to give you that information, or even on like a spelling. Don't trust my spelling, though, because I'm not the greatest speller in the world, but that's how it is. Okay, folks. So, like I said, we got a lot to cover today. Quick recap from part one. So remember, folks, we've been kind of going along with this concept of identity. Before we talked about how these kingdoms are starting to show an identity of who they are in comparison to the people who are not them, the kingdom that's next to them, and that helps us lead us into this thing that we finished off with in part one, talking about the balance between identity and anonymity with the rise of the cities. Okay, so remember, by the time we get to the year 1300 in medieval Europe, we're getting towards the end of these Middle Ages, of this middle event in history, these middle events in history. So by the time we get to the year 1300, we're slowly starting to see ideas and concepts and things that we see in the modern age. And that was your guiding question. List examples explain how the modern age really gets started with this time period here, the modern age of Europe. And what are some examples of things that started then, and that we still, that show the shape of how things come, how they become today in contemporary times. Okay, so we were talking about now, based off of that, we're talking about scholasticism when it comes to the church. That is no longer in practice anymore, and that's a very tough concept. And so hopefully you understood that from part one. If you don't, and I totally understand if you're still struggling with that a little bit, you can contact me and I will try and explain it a little bit more and point you in the right direction for some videos as well too, if you need it. Okay, but we're moving on. So we were talking about the rise of cities. So remember, for the longest time, the vast majority of people in Europe were living in rural areas, right? Out in the farms, out in the little tiny villages, and where you were born, that's where you that's where you lived, and that's where you died. Same thing like your father, same thing like your grandfather, and so on, your mother and everybody else. In Northern Europe, as we talked about a couple weeks ago, that was even more pronounced than it was in Southern Europe. Remember, Southern Europe was all about the lifeblood was the economy, as in trade and commerce. So you had some cities down there. But nothing too great. Not, we're not talking about like, millions of populous cities or anything like that. But in the north, it was very sparse. People were spread out all over the place. But by the time you get to the year 1300 in Europe, throughout Europe, not just in Southern Europe anymore, but throughout Europe, in Western Europe anyway, because remember, our focus is on Western, pretty much on Western and Central Europe. We're starting to see the rise of these urban areas, okay? And we talked about that to finish up with part one. Why are they getting bigger? Why are cities getting bigger? Well, a couple different reasons. Number one, people go to cities. Why do people go to cities? As opposed to staying out in the middle of nowhere? Well, because jobs. People need something. They need work, and if they don't want to sit there and be a farmer their whole life, they go on to do jobs in the cities. We also talked about how, obviously young people, it's usually the dream of most young people that they want to leave their small town life or small village life and go to the city to find new things, do that. But by the year 1300, we have developed in these kingdoms these economies that are now two parts. So obviously you still have the rural areas because that's where stuff is being grown. You can't grow much inside of a city. And we've established that idea a long time ago, right? That you can grow some things in a city, but for the most part, things have to be grown out in the countryside. That's where mass production of food stuff comes from. So livestock and dairy products and just food, wheat and barley and oats and all the other stuff that these people were eating. Okay, but the cities are where this new transformative ideas are starting to, take shape, take flight. Remember, by the year 1300, the First Crusade has now been in the books for over 200 years, and we have a dynamic contrast between East and West. More trade, more supply goods, you're running into new people, different cultures, everything else. And so these cities are starting to get bigger, okay? So remember, with the rise of the cities, why people go to these cities? Well, it's two reasons, okay? Number one, they're looking for an identity. They want to know who they are. They want to figure out who they are. Because remember, European history, and this goes on for a very long time, even to the modern age, is based primarily on who your father was, who your family was. They are very, very big on this in Europe. Who was your father? Who was your, who was your grandfather, and so on. And if you wanted something different, if your father was a farmer, not that there's anything wrong with that, but if you wanted something different, you didn't want to be just a farmer in the village, you had to move on and go find your own identity. And you could only do that in a city because your identity in a village was who you were, as in, who you were born to, how you got trained, that's what you were going to be. So if your father was the blacksmith, guess what you were going to be? You were going to be the blacksmith, the next one, when he moved on, when he retired, when he died. If your father was the miller or the carpenter or the whatever, the candlestick maker, guess what you were going to be? But if you move to the city, that slowly changes, because now all of a sudden you're not surrounded by, dozens of people, you're surrounded by thousands and thousands of people, and your identity can be the one of your choosing. You can shape it, okay? We also see that people go seeking that anonymity, because just like how you become what you were destined to become in a village, there is no anonymity in a small village, in a small hamlet, in a small area, because everybody knows everybody. Everybody knows everybody's secrets. But in a city, you can get that anonymity. You can move on, and you can be somebody different. You can totally reject your old life or continue with your old life, but in a different way. You could be someone different. So we see the movement to the city, at least in the Middle Ages, is a big combination of seeking identity and seeking that anonymity, okay? But moving on, remember, the only reasons that these cities survive and even exist is not because they're growing food, right? That's done in the countryside. It's because of trade and commerce. These cities, just like they've always been, become the center that everybody comes to in order to do what they need to do. So if you have something that you want to trade, you can't trade it to the mountains and the forests. You got to bring it into the city to trade it to somebody that wants what you have and they have what you want, and so on, okay? So these cities start to get bigger and bigger, okay? We're not talking, once again, we're not talking about, giant 1.5 million size cities, but for medieval times, if you have a city that's pushing 30,000 people, that's pretty good. That's pretty good, okay? So we're going to be talking about the livelihoods of these people, but first we need to talk about this. Okay, so with the rise of the cities, we see this precedes the year 1300. We see the rise by the late 1100s, 1200, the rise of what is called the Guild, G-U-I-L-D, the rise of what is called the Guild, G-U-I-L-D. Here's a quick definition of what a guild is. A guild is an association of, whoops, where'd my little clicker go? There we go. A guild is an association of like-minded people trained and specialized in a specific task, okay? So for instance, like being a baker, who establish the business norms of their trade, okay, in their city. So there are two different types in the Middle Ages, and even now, there are two different types of guilds. There is, where'd it go? Oops. Get my notes ready to go here. Okay. Make sure that's all good. Okay, here we go. Oops. Make sure. Okay. So there are, all right, so there are two types of guilds in the Middle Ages, as it is today. There are merchant guilds and craft guilds, okay? So what are merchant guilds? Pretty self-explanatory. A merchant guild is this, an association of like-minded people trained, establish the business norms of their trade based on trade, okay? Their entire business is what? Trading things. Whatever those things are, their guild, their association, is specializing in how to do that the best way, okay? How to trade X product for Y product, how to trade Y product for X amount of money, whatever it might be. They specialize in that, okay? The second type of guilds are craft guilds, and this is what we're really going to be focusing on, and that is the ability to produce something. What are you making? And then you, along with other people, become a guild. You become an association which specializes in that thing, in that specific task, and you set up the business norms of that thing, whatever it is. So, for instance, the Baker's Guild, okay, or the Cloth Dyers Guild, or the Carpenters Guild. There's a million guilds floating around in Western Europe at this time, okay? And there are many reasons why these people form these guilds, okay? So let's say you're a person, you're fresh in from the city, you know how to bake, okay? We'll just go with this. You know how to bake. Back home, you were taught everything you knew, and you baked bread for the other people in the village. So you make it to the city, you're a young man, and what are you going to do? Well, you can start baking stuff and selling your food products, right? The things that you bake, your bread, to the people, and that's all great. But then eventually a group of other men are going to come calling, and this group is the Bakers Guild, okay? The Bakers Guild, well, they like you and they don't like you, okay? They like you because if you're good enough, they want you to be a part of their association. They want you to be part of their guild, their Bakers Guild. They want you to join them, okay? And I'm going to explain the reasons to you why someone would join a guild, and why they get to be so powerful. So they want you, okay? If you're good enough, they want you in this guild. But they also don't like you. Because why? Because you're competition. Because right now, the people, not everybody's a baker. People are going and they're getting in a city, they're buying things. So we see this economy. So like in the village, people are self-sufficient for the most part, right? They raise their animals, they raise their foodstuffs, they grow their food, they make their food, their bread and their soups, pottage, things like that, and they eat it, and that's what they do. But in the city, people are specialized in their trade, right? That's how it is now. Most people are not raising their own cows and sheep in their backyard. They go to the supermarket and they buy food. Same thing in the Middle Ages. When you get to a city, just like how it's always been in the ancient, even to the ancient times, you are specialized in something. So let's say you're a scribe. You're a person who gets paid to write things down for other people because you're literate. Maybe you don't know how to make your own bread. So you go to the Bakers Guild and you buy bread from them. So going back to our original story, if you're this young man, they want you in the guild, but they also want to take you away as competition. They don't want you to compete with them, okay? It's gonna be very difficult to compete with them, and I'll explain why in a second, but they don't want any independent contractors, okay? They don't want any independent bakers doing a good thing, baking bread when they're baking bread, because you're the competition. You're the person who is fighting for the small amount of money with them, and they don't want that, okay? So we see in these cities the rise of these associations or guilds. What's amazing is that this concept is a very, very old concept, and it really comes into its own during the Middle Ages, especially in Western Europe. Like I said, there's hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of different guilds all around Western and Central Europe, okay? And in fact, certain cities in Western Europe become synonymous or known for what they produce, okay? They don't produce this, and this, but they produce this. They produce a lot of it, and they're really good at it. And so it becomes almost like a brand name type of thing. People are willing to pay more because they're like, oh, Oh, you mean it was produced here where they produce the best ones? Ooh, then I can charge more for it, or I'll expect to pay more for it. Okay. Let me give you an example. Here it is. For instance, during the Middle Ages in London, London was dominated by their weavers guilds. So they would get, different materials, wool, things like that, and they would weave clothes, tunics and trousers and shirts and things like that, and then they would sell the finished product. So their guild became extremely powerful, very powerful. Okay, and so that's what London was known for. In like Florence, in northern Italy, we see the Cloth Makers Guild. Okay, so they're taking cotton and things like that from Asia and from North Africa, from Egypt, and they're making different fabrics out of it. Okay, dresses, things like that. So that's what they're known for. In the Belgian city of Ghent, they're known for they're surrounded by farms, and there's sheep everywhere. So they gather the wool, they dye the wool, they strain it out, they make it all into different shapes and different colors, everything else, and then they sell it around Europe to clothing makers, clothiers, okay? Clothiers, and they are, so their guild is the Wool Makers Guild, or the Wool Dyers Guild, okay? So, association of like-minded people specialized in this. Okay, now, there's 5 important reasons why these guilds become very, very powerful, and why these guilds become synonymous with, the end of the Middle Ages and the identity of Europe, what this means, okay? All right, so 5 major reasons why these guilds do the things that they do. Number 1 is protection, okay? And it's literally just what that means. So if you go into a city is a crowded place, and it's very dangerous. And if you have to transport your goods to another city, well, that's dangerous too. Because like I said, you can't just hop on the train and be there in 20 minutes. It's going to take you maybe a day or 2 to get from one city to another, depending on how far the cities are apart from each other. And so you need protection. Well, you could buy protection, which means usually you could go down to like the local inn or public house, and you could ask around, and you'd find like a tough looking guy and have him gather together, a couple of other tough looking guys, and you pay them as your protection. Well, that has its own consequences. It could be that those guys, which they probably are, have done some not so nice things in the past. Sometimes they do good, sometimes they do bad. So it could be that they attack you they're supposed to be protecting you, and they attack you on the way to the next town or village and take your stuff. It could be that they know that they have you over a barrel, so they charge you exorbitant protection fee. They're like, yeah, sure, we'll take you over here and we'll protect you and protect your goods, but you're going to give us X amount of gold, and that's might be way more than you're willing to spend, or that you even have. So you could do it on your own if you're just an independent producer of these things, or you can join a guild, and because a guild offers, number 1, protection. Okay, so for instance, if I need to take stuff, if I'm in like the Armorers Guild, I'm producing armor, I can join that guild, and they offer me protection. So if I say, okay, I got a load of stuff, I'm taking over this other city, the guild, the whole group, is going to pay for that. They're going to pay for protection. They're going to pay for transport. They're going to pay for my protection, right? And they're going to pay legitimate guys, not just a bunch of hired thugs down at the inn to do it. They're going to pay legitimate guys that's what they do, right? Protection squads to take me from one place to the next, okay? But it doesn't really cost me too much because I'm in the guild. I'm part of the club, okay? So number one reason why people would join a guild in the cities is that it offers protection, literally protection for your money and for your life, okay? Number 2, let me grab some water really quick. All right, this one's a little trickier. The guilds in the Middle Ages provided the economic backbone of the city, they provided the economic backbone of the region, and they provided the economic backbone for the kingdom, okay? These guilds got to be so powerful, and they generated so much money, not just through taxation, but through, stimulating the local and the regional economies, that they became, and they're focused in the cities, that these cities and these guilds become some of the most important things in a king's domain, in a kingdom. Okay, no matter what, you want to do everything you can to protect that city where these major guilds are, because they are the ones that are bringing in a ton of money for you, okay, and for the kingdom as well. One way they could, obviously, just the tried and true method, taxation. They're providing a steady surplus or steady tax base. They provide a steady tax base to that Lord Mayor, right? To that person who's in charge of the city, and then he is able to send that money up the food chain. Okay, so a steady stream of taxation. They always have money, because unless the economy completely bottoms out for some reason, they have money because they control all of what they do in that city. Okay, sometimes, and this happened often in England, but it did happen around other places in Europe, like the Low Countries, and especially in northern Italy. The king, or the person who's in charge, would offer what's called a charter. Okay. Get this out here. Okay. So number one is protection, right? Number two, they provide the economic backbone. So, protection. Okay, so number one, it would obviously provide a tax base, a taxation. But number two, in certain circumstances, the king might even, what he does is he writes, his advisors write up this big, it's called a charter, right? It's a legal document, and he stamps it, it gets stamped with his royal seal. And what that means is that the king, whoever's in charge, the duke or whatever, gives free reign to this guild. Basically says, you don't have to pay me taxes. Now, why the heck would a king say that to a guild, this very important association that's making a ton of money? The reason why he might do that, offer what's called a free charter, is because he realizes, and his advisors realize, if they're smart, that by them not giving him a chunk of cash, a chunk of money, what are they doing with that money? Well, they're getting rich, but they're not just sitting on that wealth. They're reinvesting the wealth, and they're putting the wealth back into the economy. And so by not taxing them, you're in essence putting that money back into the entire economy, not just from that guild, but everyone that guild deals with, they are now part of this, that economy has gone up. And then what do? You tax them. You tax the rest of the economy, all the other groups. Okay, just the people in general. Okay, so these guilds provide an economic backbone both in taxation and in this free charter system. Okay, all right. Number three. All right, number three reason to join a guild, and why they got to be so popular, and eventually why a lot of people did not like them, is like with anything, they become kind of like, well, not kind of, they become an exclusive club. Once you get in, well, guess what? You get to reap all the benefits that that the club offers. But they make it what? They make it easy or hard to get in? Well, this is easy, as in understanding this. They make it hard. They make it hard. If they just let everybody in, well, pretty soon what happens? The quality of the product goes down. So they make it an exclusive place. They make it difficult to get into the guild. But once you get in, you're kind of golden, okay? And so what they do is they set up, right, rules, and they have traditions. and they have a culture, okay? They have rules, they have traditions, they have culture, they have bylaws, right? They have, not just rules, but actual laws that you have to go by. Otherwise, you could be punished, you could be expelled from the guild, you could be, not raised up in the ranks of the guild, whatever it might be, okay? They also create a step process. Okay, they also create a step process. So when you first get in, you are considered a what? An apprentice, okay? And this is an idea that has been around for a long time, and it's going to keep going on, and it's going to reach its pinnacle in the Renaissance 200 years later. But when you first get in, you're considered an apprentice. You're a nobody. You're brand new to the game. Even if you've done it before, you're still brand new compared to what these guild members can do. So you're an apprentice. It depends on what guild you're in, but apprenticeships could take anywhere between 5 to 10 years. And what do you do as an apprentice? You slowly learn. You have somebody over you that is teaching you what to do and how to do it. You slowly learn, you slowly learn, you slowly learn. And year after year, you are expected to produce small things to show that you're learning. And if you're one of the cream of the crop of the apprentices, you might even be allowed to work on a project with one of the masters, one of the people that are, up top. And it's a way to show that you're doing really well, okay? After after your apprenticeship is up, you are now promoted in the guild to what's called a journeyman, okay? A journeyman is not an apprentice, but not a master. They're right in the middle. A journeyman has proven himself to be competent, more than competent. They have proven themselves to be not a liability. They've proven themselves to be a major player in the guild, that they can produce good things, and they can be left alone for the most part. They don't have to have somebody overseeing them like you do with an apprentice to make sure they don't screw up. And then at the very top, the very pinnacle of the guild, which only so many people get to, is the mastership, or becoming a master. A master is in charge of the guild. There's a couple of them running around in most guilds. You might have a council of masters. The masters take on certain apprentices, they take on certain journeymen, so on. But they're the ones that dictate everything that goes on in the guild. They're the people that, that explain the rules, they continue the traditions of the guild, they keep the culture alive. They change the laws if the laws aren't working, or they enforce the laws, okay? So you have apprentice, journeyman, and master. Usually to become a master, you have to produce something of utter importance, something that is, like maybe it took you years and years to create, okay? So maybe you're working on that loaf of bread for years and years and years, okay? But yes, what this does, and the reason why this is so important to the guilds, is because it establishes a precedence. It establishes that whatever is produced in this guild is going to be top quality. It's going to be top notch. It's going to be the best that can be made in this area. It shows that the standards are set extremely high, and that anything less would be, would be a shortcoming. And so by doing this, only letting certain people into the guild, you are showing that, we only let the best of the best in here. We only offer the best products. You stick with us because you're getting the best of the best. You know that the person who isn't in this guild, in this club, is well, their stuff might be substandard, it might be overpriced, it might not be just as good as what we're offering, okay? All right, so we get that down, and we'll move on. I got 2 more to give you, and then we'll move on. Okay, let's see, what do we got here? Okay, number 4, there we go. Okay, number 4 is what we consider strength in numbers, okay? It kind of sounds like we're rehashing 1, but it's a little bit different. The reason why this is so important to guild membership, and why you have guilds in the first place, it's not just that they're producing this stuff, but that you have strength in numbers. If you have one baker, we'll go back to the poor baker, and he does not like a new tax that's put on bakers or something like that. well, he can go complain to the local magistrate, to the local government official, but he's not going to get anywhere. He's a nobody. He's just another guy living in this city. Even if, you know, two of them come together, three, or even five of them come together, big deal. Should be a bunch of disgruntled bakers. Sorry about that, guys, but it is what it is. Do as you're told. But if you are part of a guild, if you're part of that bakers guild, and there's, you know, a couple hundred of you in this guild, and these guys are, you know, the top ones, the masters, are wealthy and they have shops all over the place, well, chances are that they probably are canoodling with the people that are up top. At least they are, because the people up top are still nobles. If they're not hanging out with them because they're not nobles, even though they're wealthy now, they still have some influence over them, because these nobles know that they can't just bite the hand that feeds them. They know that they have to acquiesce to a certain degree and give in. And you can do that. You have that power. You have that economic and political power. You have that both economic and political power through the guild, okay? Through this organization, through this association that you have, okay? Whereas just you wouldn't have that if you just had one person, or if you're, you know, just an individual person, okay? The person in charge of that city has to listen to these guilds. They can't just ignore them or blow them off. They have to listen to them because remember, either they're paying a huge amount of taxes to the city, or they have a free hand and they can decide, well, we might just do something different, which will hurt the local economy, which will then hurt the regional economy, and so on, all the way up the food chain. And if the king starts getting upset by this, well, he's going to find out what's going on, and, you know, the ramifications are going to come down on that local leader, okay? What does this lead to? Well, it leads to, once again, a tightening of the restrictions when how it gets into a guild, because if you know, people aren't dumb. They realize that by joining these, they are far more stronger than they are if they're just by themselves. And so it tightens the restrictions on getting into a guild. They only let in the best. You know, you can't just let anybody in. But what does this also lead to, unfortunately? Well, it leads to, because when you have economic and political power, it also leads to corruption, right? So we have corruption. So a lot of times, if you have a guild member or guild masters that are in you know, positions of power, they can basically, you know, extort, and they can bribe certain officials and things like that. So we do see a rise in corruption at this level, okay? All right. But then this also, so the economic power is based on what? Monopolies, right? So it's kind of a quid pro quo, give and take. You have strength in numbers in the guild. You can go to the local magistrates and say, hey, we don't like these other people that aren't part of our guild. We're willing to kick up some more money if you're willing to put harsher restrictions on them. And it's a tit for tat, right? So they probably are going to be willing to do that to help you out, because you demand what? A monopoly on whatever. So if you're the Bakers Guild in this city, you don't want other people competing against you. You want a full monopoly. You want every piece of bread that's being sold in that town to be produced in one of your bakeries, okay? You don't want competition, all right? So that is number 4. And then finally, number 5, a byproduct of that, of the guild system. Whoops. The guilds realize that as they're making money, doesn't matter what guild you're in, you're making money, that you have, well, now what? Disposable income, which this is something really unheard of. The only people that had disposable income for the longest time were the nobles. And even they did not have too much disposable income. Only the rich of the rich did. But when you get to these guild members, they have disposable income. Now all of a sudden, you know who they are, because they're walking around, they got nice clothes, they're wearing nice hats, Their wives are wearing the nicest things. They're living in a nice house, you know, maybe on the outskirts of town or in the nice section of the city. These guys have money. And you can't just sit on it like a dragon and hoard your wealth, because people are going to start getting upset. Like, well, why does he have all this money, and why is he doing something about it? So what these guilds do, and a lot of this is done altruistically, based on the teachings of the church, you know, like, hey, we should be helping people with this money, you know, not loaning it, not like giving the, not like, here, you take some money, and because remember, that's against the rules, and it's against the law for the most part with Christians at the time. But you can give it away, then that's what called charity, right? And so we see that with these guilds. We see the rise of these benevolent, where is it, orders, right? They have a ton of money, and they want to look good to the rest of the population. So they expand charities, right? They find the people that are sick. They find the people that are hurting. They find the people that aren't you know, doing well, and they provide food, and they provide you know, whatever medical supplies, and they help the churches. They give, you know, money to the churches, and they do this. Now, why are they doing this? Like I said, they're doing it, you know, probably because it's the right thing to do, but also secondarily, it's good PR. It's good PR. If people see you doing great things for the community, then they're more willing to back you up when, you know, the, you know, blank hits the fan, right? They're more willing to back you up when you are, you know, under, you know, assault from the city or something like that, okay? And it's the patronage system, and we're going to be talking about the patronage system as we move on to the Renaissance, okay? Now, why are these guild things so important? Okay, why are these guild things so important? Well, there it is. Yeah. Okay. Okay. Let's see if I can spell it correctly. There we go. Okay. Okay, folks. So why is this important, this whole guild system? Why is this such an important idea, such an important concept? It's so important, and it's such an amazing concept at this time, and why we should be discussing it is because, remember, for the longest time, after the fall of the Romans, there's only two classes of people. There's only two levels in this pyramid, you know, right, in this pyramid. At the top, you have the top people. The small amount of people, you have the nobles, right? The nobles, and then you have the church, really right next to them, okay? Not like the regular general priesthood, but the you know, the cardinals and all the top church officials right up there with them. They're not struggling for cash, for money, okay? But then down at the bottom, encompassing 98% of the population is what? Is the peasantry, the commoners, the people that have little to no money. Life is a struggle. Life is short. Life is brutal. You live, you work, and you die. And you did whatever your family did before and what they did before and so on. And that's really what it is. But by the time we get to year 1300, you see the rise of these cities. The guilds are establishing a new class of people, okay? These people might have started out as commoners, okay? They certainly aren't nobles. They're not people that were born to a princedom or a dukedom or something like that. They are not nobles, but they're not commoners anymore. They're not just the run-of-the-mill, you know, nobodies at the bottom, okay? They have moved into and created a separate class, okay? And that class is called the bourgeoisie, okay? This is a French word, comes from the Old French for walled city, or whoops. Okay, There's different terms for it depending where you are, like the German, the Bürger. If you went to even further east to like Poland and Hungary, they were called the boyars. But we know it in this neck of the woods primarily by the fancy term, the French term, of course, the one that's hardest to spell, the bourgeoisie. Okay, bourgeoisie gets its name from bourgeois, which means walled city. Because remember, it would be impossible to have a middle class. It would be impossible to have this newer class of people without an urban population. Okay, it cannot happen in a rural setting. All right, it cannot happen in a rural setting. It took people moving to the urban setting and establishing this new identity as tradespeople, as workers, as artisans, okay, as doing something what? Specialization of labor, right? So if you are a farmer who is raising crops out in the fields, well, guess what? There's 2.8 million other farmers doing the same thing. They're raising crops, doing exactly what you're doing, okay? So there's no specialization of labor there. But when you go to the cities, and this is something old, right? From the old city-state models back in like Sumer, there's a specialization of labor, right? You have only a couple people who can do X job, whatever it might be, whether it's, you know, making benches or producing armor for people. You know, this is a time period where it's not like there's 80,000 people that can do that. It takes years and years and years to learn how to do this and get to the point where you can produce your own stuff and even train other people to do it, okay? So this thing, people coming to the city, and over time, this creates, these guilds help form the basis of what we in the modern age understand as the middle class, the bourgeoisie, the people that are specialized in their fields. This continues today, folks, obviously, where the majority of the middle class are people that are in specialized fields. They are not people that, for the most part, do not count themselves amongst the people that can do, that anybody could do this job. You know, like for instance, like if it might be manual labor. I'm not detracting from any of that, and I'm not saying it's bad at all. I'm just saying that for the first time, we start to see in European society a delineation, right? We start to see the levels, that there's still the nobles at the top, and they're going to be at the top for a long time. You know, basically you're there because that's who, you know, what family you were born to. Okay, you didn't earn it, you're just there. You have the people at the bottom, okay, the people that are doing the same humdrum existence that they've had, you know, for a long time. But now for the first time, you've taken a big chunk of that from the bottom and you put it in the middle, okay? And this will change. The identity of the bourgeoisie will change over time. So by the time we get to like the 19th century, the bourgeoisie is not considered the middle class, it's considered the upper middle class, the people right below the rich, okay? But at this time, it's the people that are specialized in labor. They do a specific thing, and it's put them above their commoner counterparts, okay? They haven't made it to the top, and they can't make it to the top because that's based on heredity, and it's based on, you know, luck of the draw, who you're born to. But they can make it up here, where yeah, they're not the duke of something, but they have a nice house, they've got clothes, they've got money, they've got servants, they've got everything, just like a noble, just not the title, okay? And then moving on really quickly, the guilds are the first time really in European history where you see, to a very small degree, this isn't some sexual revolution, a very small degree, where women, for the first time, are joining in as well with these guilds, okay? Now, the vast majority of guilds were men only, women need not apply, but we're seeing even in this old drawing from the 15th century, what do we have up here sitting there firing the armor up here in the forge? You have a woman. You have women slowly but surely, some very, very, very tiny amount, that are making it into these guilds. But not just that, they're now also in the middle class as well by virtue of usually their husbands. They're there, okay? And we're seeing that in this time period. You got a picture of it here? Yeah, there we go, okay? And that leads us to our next thing, folks. Oops, where'd it go? Get some other notes. Okay. The rise of the guild system, folks, is synonymous with the rise of another thing in Europe, and that is the rise of the banking system. Okay, you cannot have a middle class, and by the time you get to the year 1300 and so on, that's how it's been ever since, unfortunately. Ugh. Sorry to all you that are studying to become bankers. You need bankers in a society. That's how it goes. You need somebody who is moving the money from one spot to the next. You need to have that middleman, that person that can offer you the money. It's the way it goes. Where does the term come from? It comes from the Italian. So the word banking comes from the Italian word banca, B-A-N-C-A, which means tabletop. So the first banking transactions were obviously conducted, right there on some kind of tabletop, okay? And then over time, this took on the terminology. And it even comes down to in the modern age, when somebody goes to a job and they work and then the government takes their share of taxes, it's considered that they are being paid over the table. If you go work at a job and the government doesn't know you're working at a job, it might be like a part-time job, and you are usually paid under the table, which means that your employer is giving you money without letting the government know about that, and it's considered under the table. Okay, the government can't tax it because the government doesn't know about it. So that's where that term comes from. But banking really picks up steam. It started, remember, we saw a kind of an idea of banking with those old Templar Knights, right? All the way back in the 1100s and leading up to the 1200s. We saw that with these Templar Knights, and they did the little traveler's check things, right? You could they write a piece of paper and they give it to you, and you can give your money to one place, and then you go to where you're going, and then you go to their other associate branch, wherever it might be. You show them the piece of paper, they give you your money. Okay, that's a form of banking. But this banking is what we see as banking. This is a direct connection. This is a direct connection. It is synonymous with our understanding of banking. These medieval bankers were doing everything that bankers do now. It comes into its own right here. So the idea of banking comes into its own. They were offering investments, right? Not, if you wanted to buy a new ship because you wanted to set up a trade between, Venice and whatever. Well, buying a new ship costs a lot of money. So you go to the bank, you give them collateral, right? You give them, maybe your home or something like that. You buy this ship, and then what do? You pay the bank off, okay? You pay the bank off. Now, this ran into problems. Do you see where the problems run into? It runs into problems with what group? Well, the church, obviously, because the church is telling people you can't do that. You can't do, high interest loan payments, things like that. By the year 1300, we're starting to see how, for the first time, something else is starting to advance faster than religion, than theology. And so in the early Middle Ages, right, the idea was be a good Christian, be a good Christian, be a good Christian, because life is miserable, life is short, and you're going to go to hell if you don't. But we want you to go to heaven. But by the time we get to the year 1300, and these economies are starting to get bigger and stronger, everybody understands and realizes that nothing can be done without money. And without banks, you don't have a legitimate source of income. Because the only other ways to get money would be go to attack some other country and take their stuff, whatever. But that's ridiculous, and that takes so much time and more money to do that. So you can go to these banks. Where did most of these banks flourish and get started? In those city-states in northern Italy. Those city-states and those families that started those banks, like the Medici and the Sforzas and the Gonzagas and those types of groups, those types of families, they became the bankers of Europe. They established huge banks with their main bank there in those city-states in northern Italy, like in places like Florence, Siena, Modena, Milan, those places. Rome, and then they set up branches of their bank in all the major urban centers throughout Europe, like in Paris and London, Antwerp, those places, okay? Then you can go. So like I said, these banks are doing everything that a modern bank is doing. They're offering investments. They're offering loans, okay? They're offering loans. They even get in the insurance game. So much, insurance becomes such a lucrative thing. This is crazy. We think of insurance as a modern concept, but it isn't. They even get into insurance, where like they will give you the money to buy that boat. Then they will take insurance out on your ship, so that if your ship gets destroyed in a storm or gets taken by pirates, even though you lose all your money and you still owe them money for the price of the ship, they're getting money based off of that, the insurance speculation. So, these things that we think of as modern, they're not so modern. These ideas have been around for a long time. There was even insurance scams, stuff like that, okay? So these banks are doing the same things, and then it's just the typical, yes, we'll hold on to your money for you as well too. Now, it's not like they've got, big safes back there. It's basically like a room that's guarded by many, many guards. It's behind, thick walls, and they keep your money there. And then they have everything in a ledger, okay? Whoops. They have everything in a ledger, and they're keeping track of it. As you can see from this drawing, from the 15th century, so this was done in the early 1400s. What do we have here? Once again, we have a woman, okay? This woman is obviously literate, okay? Now, we don't know if she's a noble woman or if she's a middle-class woman. Chances are, since she's actually doing something productive, that she's a middle-class woman, that she's a part of that bourgeoisie. We can surmise that her husband is probably a member of a guild, and then he's bringing home a good amount of cash. But what is she doing? She is helping with the family business. While he's off doing his thing, she is there working on the ledgers, okay? She is there doing the paperwork. She's keeping track of who owes what money, how much money they owe to individual other people or other guilds, whatever it might be. But we can tell that this woman is in that upper class, or that middle class, because of the way she's dressed. We see that she's in her own home, okay? She's in her own place. They have she's in a beautiful fabric, blue, which is still an expensive color. And then, look, she even has her little pet dog here. And what's around the little pet dog's neck? A little bauble, little collar. It's got little bells on it or whatever. So this family has reached the point where they have enough disposable income that they can spend it even on their pets, okay, and do the thing. So once again, we see a little bit of women joining in the ranks, but just like we saw with how we've talked about before, the idea that women don't influence their husband's decisions, even 700 years ago, is silly. A man comes home, he's complaining about whatever political problems are going on. Officially, she has no political power, and he probably has little too. But it doesn't mean he's not coming home and asking her opinion about it. And it's not saying that she is probably definitely giving him that opinion, okay? So here we have a banking scene, okay? So we got a couple people coming in, depositing their cash, and doing their thing, okay? All right, moving on. What was life like for these people? Where did it go? Okay. Get to my correct notes. Okay. What was life? We're going to go through this really quick. What was life like for the people still out in the fields? Remember, the vast majority of people didn't all of a sudden pick up one day and go, okay, I'm going to the city, and move to the city. No, that didn't happen. The vast majority of people were still living out in their rural lives, still farmers, still commoners, still doing their thing, okay? What were they doing? Well, life was a little bit better by the year 1300 in comparison to these people's great-great-grandparents back in 1100s or year 1000 or even before that. Life was a little bit better. It wasn't great. The counties, or the countryside was not lawless like it was 300-400 years earlier, but it wasn't exactly the safest places either, okay? Because the land was still wild. Brigands and thieves still hid in the woods, stuff like that. By this point now, since there's a centralized authority, There's patrols and there's laws, but you know the laws only go so as far as where the city magistrates are, or where the local magistrates are, where the reeves are, or like the local like law enforcement people. If you can get away from them, well, you've gotten away from them. But these people are living still pretty tough lives, right? It's still a matter of if you get hurt. You got two choices. You can go to the healer, or you can go to the priest. They'll help you. One will help you physically, the other one will help you spiritually. But if you get, infections, anything like that, the life is still pretty tough. These people are still living in small, cramped quarters. Okay, still living in small, cramped quarters. They're not living in major, condominiums here. Very, very small. This is a reconstruction of a typical hut or a house. This is the whole thing. This is where a family of up to 6 or 7 would live. Okay, very, very tiny. There's no glass on the windows because glass is extremely expensive. So basically, you just put the shutters across, but there's no, there's no borders, as in like the rain can seep in, and it does. Critters can get in, as we see from this one. Here's the inside. The top, the roof is made out of thatch and wood, like wood cross beams, but it's cheap. It's way too expensive to stick like tiles or anything else up there. It's way too expensive, so it's just thatch. Like I said, critters can get in there, and you're spending your life dealing with critters, okay? Inside of these homes, you're dealing with, mice, continuously rats. They just are part of life. You're not, now, a person in a home would see a big rat run across the floor. They'd be screaming and, oh my God, calling the exterminator. But in this time period, it's common. That's what you have. Even in this time period, you might have a couple of the animals living inside with the people as well too, to add more warmth, but also to protect them, because if they're just tied up outside, people come by and steal them, or whatever it might be, or wild animals could come and eat them, and so on. Then you're not in a good place. But the lives of the peasant was, we kind of take one major thing for granted in our modern society, and that is privacy. The idea that, there's always a place in your home that you can go away to and kind of escape, your family or your roommates or your friends or whatever it might be, like your room. That's kind of your place. But in medieval life, privacy was really non-existent. There was no privacy. Everybody was exposed to life from a very early age. Okay, so for instance, usually people would sleep up on the little second level. You climb up to it. We're talking not like a flight of stairs. It's not like this is an 8-story house, but maybe like you're 4 or 5 feet off the ground. But they're all sleeping together for warmth and protection. When mom and dad decide that they, want some alone time, well, they don't have alone time. They're just doing their thing right there while the children are laying next to them, because you just learn about that. You learn about the birds and the bees very, very quickly, okay? And people learn how to do things for themselves. They've learned this. Remember, they didn't go to school. They didn't go to trade school learning how to build a fire, or how to, fix the sawhorse or something like that. They've learned this. They've learned this from their parents, and who learned it from their grandparents, and so on, going all the way back in time, like we talked about. So remember, there's always learning going on. Okay, there's always learning going on. But it's gonna catch these people in the butt here pretty soon. Okay, so excuse me. One of the things that I want you to be aware of. Let me see if we get to it here. We'll get to it here in a second. One of the things I want you to be aware of too is what was the number one killer of these people back in the day? It wasn't war, it was disease. Okay, it was disease. Disease was still and will always be the number one killer of humans in the world. It kills far more people than fighting. Okay, even though fighting kills a lot of people, it kills a lot more people. Okay. And unfortunately for these people, since they had no concept of bacteriology or germs or anything like that, easily preventable diseases such as dysentery, bacterial infections, childbirth deaths, stuff like that, they didn't know. And so unfortunately, those things were commonplace. Okay. All right. All right. Moving on. How are their counterparts in the cities? Well, just because you move to a city doesn't mean that it's any less disgusting. It's just now that you're around thousands of people instead of dozens of people. So the lives of the common person in the cities, okay, if you weren't one of those fancy rich guild members living in your nice little place, was, well, pretty rough too. So the cities were very cramped, very unclean. There was no such thing as sewage systems. So people literally, quite literally, would just dump their what was called night soil. So since there was no indoor plumbing, if you had to poop or if you had to pee, you crawled out of bed, you reached underneath your bed or in the corner, and you had what was called a chamber pot. Okay, it was just literally a pot, chamber pot. The rich people had fancy porcelain ones. Poor people had wooden buckets. You did your business in it, and unless you wanted to go in the middle of the night to dump it out, you just let it sit there. In the morning, you would, if you were lazy, you would just dump it out the window, and it would fall in the street, or you would take it out and dump it in the street yourself. But that was it. Okay. These streets, when you go to Europe, many of these places, the old parts of the city are still very narrow, very tight, very dangerous. At night, it's not like the lights turned on, the street lights turned on. They, it got very dark in the city. And so when you got these buildings surrounding you, you're shrouded in darkness. The moonlight can't get down to you. There might be a wall sconce somewhere with like somebody's lit there's a flame going, but it's very dark. It's dangerous. People are, preying on people that aren't suspecting. People that are not from the city that first make it to the city are usually the easiest marks, and people that are from the city, con men or just thieves, pickpockets. Just like now, they can tell in a heartbeat that you're not from around there, so you better be careful. They use different tricks to try and get your money away from you, going from having kids pickpocket you to just bait and switch, or just to get you drunk in a tavern. Be your best friend, get you drunk in a tavern until you've spent all your money. Or maybe use a girl to lure you to like a darkened place, and just the typical, just bash him over the head and take his stuff. There we go. We start seeing apartment houses in cities, right? Because there's only so much room, so not everybody's in their own little hut. So in a way, the peasants out in the fields kind of have it a little bit better. But you start getting like apartment type houses, right? Where houses are built on top of each other, but the quarters are cramped, disease is rampant. So for instance, in a village, if somebody comes down with some disease, you can basically just quarantine them in their house. There's no civil liberties, so they have to stay there. But in a city, if all of a sudden, if the plague or a pox or something else springs up in one corner of the city, well, within probably a week, everybody is going to have it if they can't take off, and they're going to spread it because they're so smashed. Now, what does this do? This leads to, for the first time in history, in the 1300s, first time in history, the first time in the Middle Ages, where since these cities are the powerhouses when it comes to taxation, that you start seeing civil government for the first time. You start seeing people that go around and that are paid by the city. They're actually paid through taxes by the regional people that control that city to do the things that need to be done to keep a city running. Okay, so you have like a city guard that's paid, right? They're like police for the first time. It's not just like people taking the law in their own hands. You now have, whatever, depending on how big the city is, maybe 20, 30 guys with, like deputies underneath the sheriff, and they go around, they patrol the streets, and they, get rid of prostitutes, and they get rid of, thieves and stuff like that. The punishment for those types of things are not prostitution, but for like if you're caught stealing something, are severe. Mutilations, torture, and could be even death. So if like you steal something like really important, like a horse or something like that, something that's very expensive, hangings. Okay, there's no such thing as oh, he's a child, he can't do that. You have hangings of old people, in children as well. Brandings, mutilations, taking off ears, taking out eyes, taking off hands, whatever it might be. And these are all done in public, basically as a way for that regional government to tell you, to show you, don't do this or else. This could happen to you. So you have, some kids sitting there swinging from the gallows. It's horrendous to us, and we look at it in the modern age and say, oh my gosh. But you have to understand, this was the beginnings of it. This was the first time that there's actually, in the Middle Ages, that there's actually a civil government willing to work on stuff. You see many of the cities, especially the big ones like Paris and London, they start forming task forces, realizing that you can't just let refuse and filth and sewage sit on the streets, because it's not just humans, it's animals too. These people are pushing their animals throughout the cities. You've got horses, you've got pigs, sheep, everything else. They're all doing their business there. It stinks to high heaven. Can you imagine what it would smell like in the summertime? But they actually are paying, like waste workers to go clean up the streets, right? Where they're all pushing it. They're pushing it into usually the river system, pushing it out into the river because there's no sewage system. They're pushing it in the river, and which unfortunately leads to other spreading of diseases and everything else, because the same river system that is their sewage system is the same river system that they're getting their drinking water from, usually if they don't have a well, okay? So the importance of the rise of these cities, another one, is that we start seeing, like I said, the beginning of a civil government in many of these places, right? They're lighting lights at night in some places. This takes a long time. It's not like all of a sudden they decided to do this and it just happened overnight. This took generations for them to get in the habit of doing this, where they start lighting lights, they start pushing the sewage out, cleaning up the streets, they start policing the streets, stuff like that. This won't happen out in the rural areas, in the countryside areas, for a long time, okay? It all originates in the cities, okay? So they're kind of slowly starting to maybe get back to a little bit of what we saw with the Romans and the Greeks, okay, in their cities. All right, folks. But all good things. This drawing is showing. Remember, in the cities, people were pushed to their portions of the city. If you were a very poor person, you were pushed to kind of the tougher part of town. This is where you were, okay? If you were part of that, middle class, well, you went over to the nice spot of town that stunk just a little bit less than the rest of the town. And then minority populations, especially like the Jews, were put into their own sections of town. There was laws prohibiting them from just freely doing things that they wanted to do. There was if the laws weren't for them, the laws were for the Christians that were there, okay? So for instance, you have this apocryphal drawing. It's basically a king telling the Jewish leaders in a town, get out, I'm expelling you, okay? I want you out of here, get out of here. And you can tell that they are Jews because based on what we talked about before, they're wearing the circles, the yellow circles that are denoting that they are different, that they are part of the Jewish population there, okay? So they're being ostracized, they're being kicked out. And so we see many of the problems that, still plague our world now. We're still going on then as well, okay? But things are looking up in the beginning, right when we hit the year 1300. But like what always happens, all good things come to an end. And, it's like right when you feel like you've taken, one step forward, life bashes you over the head and you end up taking 3 steps back. And that's really what happens in the 1300s. Things are going really well, and then all of a sudden, life happens. There's just a huge series of unfortunate events that hit pretty much all within a 50-year time span. It's just like bad news after bad news, year after year, for this 50-year time span, 25 to 50-year time span. And it sets all the progress that these Europeans have made, all these Western Europeans have made for the past, hundreds of years, it gets taken back again, okay? It gets taken back again. So we're gonna go over those really quickly to wind up this discussion, okay? All right. No, ooh. Okay, number one, so remember we talked about the Mongols in part one? Well, the Mongols, not only are they sitting there rampaging and destroying all these places in the Eastern Europe and in Asia and in the Levant there, they're laying waste to these areas, okay? Remember, if you submit, they kind of let you do your own thing. But if you fight against them, they make an example of you. And so the Mongol armies, it's been estimated that underneath Genghis Khan and his descendants, that the Mongol armies literally wiped off of the face of the earth between 80 and 190 million people. Okay, now you're thinking to yourself, nah, it can't be. I mean, those are huge numbers. That's like World War II numbers. And unfortunately, over the span of about 200 years while this group of people were in place, yeah, you can do a lot of killing. It takes longer when you're doing it by the sword and by doing the spear and the arrow, but it can be done. And so these Mongols not only are laying waste to all these places, but they're screwing up what? They're screwing up trade, okay? Because remember, where are these Europeans getting these fancy exotic things from that they're trading for? They're getting it from the East. Well, if the city that was producing, like, let's say, this certain spice, or that was the trade center for this certain spice, if it's literally burned to the ground and all the people are murdered or massacred by this Mongol army, you don't have that anymore. And so that sends a ripple effect. There's repercussions throughout Europe with it too, with these guilds and these trading guilds and these trading centers. Now all of a sudden you don't have this stuff that was making you a ton of money. It's gone now. And you can't like send representatives over there to get it fixed. That's not, we're way before that. That could ever take place in the year 1300. And so you just have to make do with something else. Well, it might not be as lucrative, but it's all you got. So the Mongols are screwing up trade in the East. Okay, so that's not a good thing. Number two big problem is that, oops, dropped my marker. Number two big problem is that you have, so in the rural areas, remember, these people are farmers, right? And we talked about before that for the longest time underneath a feudal system, these people had they had crop rotation, a 3-field rotation, right? You planted one field, you planted another field, and you let the other one go fallow, then you switched around. And for a long, long time, that worked. Well, as we get to the 1300s, these farmers are doing okay. They're doing well enough that they introduced something new into their growing season. And that is the concept of monoculture or one culture. Okay, monoculture. And this has nothing to do with like civilization or society. It has everything to do with farming. Okay, so what these peasants start doing is they are still growing that original crop, but instead of diversifying and growing a bunch of different crops, what they figured out is if I grow the one crop, which is my staple food, the one I'm using to actually eat to make my bread, like wheat or something like that, that's great. But I can grow even more of it on those 3 fields or just on those 2 fields, okay? And if I grow more than I need, what can I do with the second group? Well, I can do what we've always done. I can keep it as surplus. So if there's a famine or a drought, I have food for later. But what they start doing instead is they want in on the action too. They start growing more than they need to what? To sell it, okay? They start selling it. And so they start focusing on just planting one crop over and over and over again. Or they have one crop So they have one crop for eating or to pay taxes, right? To help pay the taxes to the nobleman, to the lord that you're on his land. But then they start then they start growing a specific crop just for selling. They're not eating it, they're selling it, okay? So for instance, I can plant a wheat field and at the end, in the fall, it's ready to grow. I've got a bunch of wheat growing up, ready to grow. But then all of a sudden, if I get a wild hair at my butt and decide, well, I can keep doing that, and I will keep doing that. But now I can start growing, let's say I'm in Southern Europe, I can start growing Orange trees. Let me start growing orange trees. Why? Because oranges are super expensive because nobody has oranges in Northern Europe. You can't grow oranges in Northern Europe. So I can start growing oranges. But what's the problem with that? Well, it's all great in theory. I grow the stuff I need to eat and the stuff I'm giving up to my landlord, but then I got all this that I can now sell for me. I can sell this big bushel of oranges. But what's a big problem with that? Well, the problem is that oranges aren't planted and grown in 5 months like wheat is. It takes years for orange orchards, or if you're producing olives or wherever, some long-term crop to grow, to finally mature, and finally get to the point where it can start supplying you with its product, whatever it is. And if you lose it, like it gets burned down, or somebody comes by and chops it, or there's some kind of blight or insects that destroy it, you've just wasted years and years and years, okay? So that is the idea of monoculture, and these peasants were getting into it heavily, okay? It didn't matter where you were. They were doing this all over the place in Western Europe, Central Europe. So that works as long as times are good. But when times are bad, we're gonna see why that doesn't work so well, okay? All right. By the time we get to year 1315, ooh, look at that terrible drawing. By the time we get to year 1315, something's been brewing, and it's something these people had no control over. It's something we don't have any control over right now, and that is natural climate change, okay? Climatologists have gone back and they've done like core sample studies where they've, gone down, because, the Earth will show you, what was going on at that time period. And it's like stuck there in its little, what is it called? Time capsule, right? In the Earth. And what happened is around the year 1315, starting, give or take a couple decades before that, but this is when it was really felt, the global temperature of the Earth, not just in like Western Europe, but the global temperature of the Earth went down 1 to 2 degrees. Now, we would, person who's not scientifically inclined would be like, well, big deal, who cares? So it's the difference between 74 degrees and 73 degrees, in like the summer, if you're like in England, okay? It's not too hot, but it's not too cold either. It's kind of right there in the middle. But to a farmer and to the stuff that they're producing, that is a huge difference, okay? And so what happens is that in a 7-year time span, this temperature change, in conjunction with a lot of other stuff we're going to talk about, the 7-year time change, or 7-year thing that happens, it causes what's called the Great Famine, okay? So it screws up with the weather cycles. So you would think, oh, rain is good, and rain is good. You need rain to be a farmer. But too much rain is also not good, okay? So like, it's one thing if it's raining for a little bit, but if it's raining for weeks at a time, that will kill all of your crops. That will destroy all your crops. It will turn everything into a blight. Everything is molded. Everything is ruined. So that ruins people's lives. If there's no rain and you just have drought, same thing, just does it in a quicker time scale where there's been just sun and sun and sun and no rain for weeks or maybe months at a time. Nothing's growing. Once again, you have no more food. And this is a chain reaction. So if no food's growing, what do you feed the animals? You can't feed the animals anything because there's nothing to feed them, barely enough to feed you. So what do? You start doing the one thing that we said that you shouldn't be doing, right? You're eating your animals, and you're not supposed to be eating your animals because you need those animals for, milk and for eggs and stuff like that, but you're starving, so you eat them. And then eventually you get to the point where you're totally running out of food. So there's incidences by the sources that people are completely out of food. They're hitting starvation times where they're eating basically anything. They're eating grass, they're eating bark, they're boiling clothes down like leather from their shoes and eating that. There's even reports that the ultimate terribleness of famine, where we talk about cannibalism. Okay, there's even reports of cannibalism. Mothers eating their children, or vice versa. People now. you have to take that with a grain of salt, just like we talked about. I mean, were there millions of people running around eating each other? Very doubtful. But were there instances of it? No doubt, absolutely. Where there was cannibalism, because that's what happens when people are starving to death. And that lasts for about 7 years, starting in 1315. So like in the 1320s, it starts to come out. The temperature stabilizes, and people get out of that. To a certain degree. But the damage is done. You've now lost millions of people over this time period that have died from starvation. Even if they haven't died from starvation itself, like they didn't die from not eating, they've died from the effects of starvation, because starvation leads to other problems such as malnutrition. It opens people up to disease, right? If your body's not healthy and you get a simple cold, well, a healthy person can just fight off the cold, just ignore it usually, and just it goes away. But a weak person is already weak, and all of a sudden now, they get a cold or whatever it might be. It could be curtains for them. Okay. So this all is all accumulating all at the same time. Okay, so you get the Mongols screwing up trade. You got the Great Famine. That time where the temperature went down is called the Little Ice Age, which is kind of a misnomer, because ice ages last a long, long time, thousands of years, and we see in ice ages a dramatic, a precipitous fall of the temperature, and the Earth has gone through many of them throughout history. But this one's kind of like, the little ice age, right? Little ice age, where it does change, but it comes back out of it in a human time scale. Okay, it's not like it lasts 10,000 years, something like that. Okay, but the biggest problem that happens in the 14th century, and it's something that happens to the point where it literally defines human history, not just European history, but human history. And I'm going to stop right there, and then I'm going to finish off this. I'm going to do a part 3, a small part 3. Okay, I'm going to finish off there, and then we'll make it to our third part.